Welcome to our presentation of Verismic Power Manager version 3.22. My name is Mike Jager, and it'll be my pleasure to show you around our product today. When it comes to power management, over the years I've found it's more effective to tell the story of power management rather than to simply do a feature-by-feature review of a product. Therefore, for today's presentation, that's what I plan to do. What I will take is the opportunity to show you how throughout the story, Verismic Power Manager meets the needs of each of the three phases. Now here at Verismic, we found that power management does fall into just three phases. The first being able to understand how much power you currently consume and how much it costs. Very critical and two very distinct items. If we look at the first of those, how much power do you consume? To have any measure of accuracy, we need to know which manufacturer and models are in your environment. This goes for both the workstation and the monitor. We'll go ahead and take this as an example, this Hewlett-Packard DX5150. To have accurate readings, what we allow you to do is to put the actual consumption values for each individual type of device into our system. Now, this can occur one of two ways. You're more than welcome to enter the values in yourself. Many of our customers do. They enjoy taking the educational time to research and figure out how much is consumed according to the manufacturer or by a third party such as Energy Star, or simply by putting a meter up to the workstations. During my pilots on site, I do that simply because of its educational value. The second way you can get this information is by taking advantage of our free of charge content service. We're continually adding more different manufacturers and models into the database with all the different consumption values pre-populated. You are free to download this data if there are any matches to the devices in your environment. Once they're entered into the database, to what we have for consumption values, these fields will automatically populate themselves. Now, what we're hoping is this will become a community effort, where we will provide the starting block for it, and from that point forward, if you should have any manufacturer models that we have not yet entered, or perhaps ones that we're never going to see because they are a white box company only in your area of the country, you will feel so inclined to share that data with us. If so, we will vet the information and then provide it into our database for all of our other customers to download. So we have a give and take. We're all trying to better the Verismic community to have accurate information. Now, we've talked about the workstations. However, when I showed you the listing of the computers, I did mention monitors. Why? Because they are equally as important as the workstation. And quite frankly, in today's environment, they can be more important than the workstation. 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a huge craze to get rid of all the CRTs in the company. We must get rid of the CRTs. I must have flat panels for my 5,000 users. Well, for the CTOs and the CIOs that were trying to simply save space and have a more manageable device, good on them. It's going to go ahead and fit the bill. Flat panels are small and they take up less desk space. Sadly, though, there were many companies that went ahead and did a blind purchase because they believed they would be saving energy. I'm replacing a CRT with a flat panel, ergo I must be saving power. That's not really the case. If you replace a 15-inch CRT with a 20-inch or a 24-inch flat panel, there's a good chance that you're actually increasing your energy costs. 5, 6, 7 years ago, that was what companies didn't think about. When we look at power consumption, the monitors are equally as important. And why did I say they may be more? Because in today's environment, you may have 2, 3, or 4 monitors where added together, even if they are energy efficient by themselves, are going to take more power than the workstation, especially if they are hooked up to, say, a small form factor. Now, the same thing goes with the monitors as does the workstations. You can go ahead and enter in the consumption values if you so choose. You're also welcome to use our content service, and again, that's free of charge. We also hope as you will share that monitor data with us as well, just as we did for the workstations. Now, that answers the consumption side of phase 1, but it has nothing to do with the cost of power. What are you paying for your power? To talk about that, we need to understand the measurement, right? Kilowatts per hour. And how much does everybody pay? Does everyone in the United States pay one price? Does everyone in Australia pay one price? Well, the answer is no. If we look at the cost of power, it has to do with many different factors. Most of the power utilities do not make their own power. They trade back and forth with other power companies. And the rates will be different any given day they make those trades. It also has to do with how far they have to transport that power from the plants. Which node are you on for their power grid? Now, as a typical customer of a power vendor, you're never going to know where you are on the power grid. And chances are, if you ask, they're never going to tell you. When it comes to understanding the cost of power, the only thing you need to remember is do not assume 2 buildings for one company right next to each other, 3 blocks apart, have the same cost of power. It may have the same cost, but chances are they're going to have something different. Many different reasons. Those two buildings just happen to be on different end nodes of the power grid. The building providers have negotiated different base rates for all their clients in the buildings. Several different items. Now, why do we care? Why do we care if it's off by so much as half of a cent, or even more? Well, just as we did for the consumption, we want to be as accurate as possible. Therefore, Verismic Power Manager allows you to have any number of power prices. This solution was designed to be global capable right out of the box. Therefore, you can have an unlimited number of what we call our power vendor configurations. This allows you to configure so little as one cost of power up to tens of thousands if one so wanted to. Beyond having the different costs of power for locations, what we also have is a flexible schedule-based engine. Now think back to the cell phone days when you didn't have one flat rate for all of your calls any day, time of the day, any day of the week. They had variable rates. The same thing goes for certain places in the world. Therefore, as you'll see, you can assign different costs of power based upon that schedule given to you by your power vendor for every hour of the day and every day of the week. This can be as simple as you need or as complex as you need. And again, this is based upon your cost of power. It has nothing to do with what you should do to understand the costs. You put in exactly what you as a company pay for your power at each different location. You can have multiple schedules if you like. You can even so much as have a different schedule if you do have variable rates for every one of your power vendors that you have configured. It's completely up to you. What you can also track, if you so desire, is your carbon footprint. Now, to understand what this is, every pound of carbon has certain percentages that feed into it from different power sources. This information is at the bottom of most power bills, such as mine here in Baltimore Gas and Electric. Every month they tell me what my carbon footprint is. If for any reason you do want to explore the green aspect, not necessarily the money-saving aspect, then this is a wonderful feature. You can go ahead, enter your carbon footprint from your power vendor, and again, for each power vendor, if you have more than one location around the world, and track how many pounds of carbon you are reducing by using your PCs less, thanks to power management. Now, once we understand both the consumption and the cost of power, it's important to realize how this information plays its critical role. Now, would you look at this one time of year? Well, yeah, you could. Would it give you any benefit? No, not really. If you look at understanding consumption and cost, you need to realize that all these workstations in your environment are pulling power and costing you money 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Therefore, if we only looked at it once a year, we're missing an opportunity for trend analysis, understanding when changes occur as they occur throughout the entire year. I'll give you an example. Let's go ahead and we'll run a quick cost report. Dates I'm going to choose, January 19th through February 15th. And for the purposes of this presentation, that's the range we're going to use for everything. Feel free to jot it down. I'm not playing any tricks on you. If we go ahead and pull this, what it will show is the breakdown of cost as it changes every day for the different locations in our environment. Now, trend analysis allows us to say, instead of looking one time a year, I'm actually going to look much more frequently. Perhaps I want to look once a week, or back it off a little and do once a month. What this will do is allow you to see, are your locations trending evenly for their cost of power throughout the year? Do you have some that are costing more for reasons that usually would be unknown to you? And do you have others that are taking less power, which costing you less money? Why is it important? Because if you look one time a year, say at the end of your fiscal year, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't put the power back into the wall. You can't go to the power company and say, I'd like my money back, please. Therefore, being able to realize these negative impacts right when they're happening are critical, because that's the time you can make changes. You can't go back in time, but you can head off negative impacts if you see them as they occur. Now, once we understand what those costs are, and we understand we can see trend analysis, now we can get into the second phase, and this is where it gets really fun. Predicting the future. Wouldn't IT love it if they could predict the future of every project before they started? Would a CIO not love to know if every project would be successful before he took the time and wasted the man hours of everyone on his staff? I think they would. Now, what we have here is an example power policy. Don't memorize it. No need to. There's no test later on. If we take a look at this power policy, there's many moving parts. I'm going to explain to you how this plays into predicting the future. You're going to see actions in here such as standby. Everybody knows what standby is. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes for those who don't. The time of day that those actions are active, the days of the week that they're active, and also over here, our trigger time window. This is the most important part to making sure our power policy is successful. Now, these different times may look like somebody just took guesses, put a blindfold on, right? 45 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. What on earth was this person thinking? Well, IT can be one of two people. The IT department can be the individuals that pay a consultant $5,000 for a white paper that had nothing to do with their environment, that says put your PCs to sleep after 60 minutes. The problem is that white paper has absolutely no bearing on your end users. And suffice it to say, power management is based solely on end user behavior. Therefore, and I'll say this very bluntly and boldly, there can never be power management best practices. It is physically impossible. Any organization or individual that approaches you and says they will be glad to show you the best practices to power management is lying. It cannot happen. And you're going to see why as we go throughout this presentation. When you look at this power policy, I'm going to show you why these specific timers and these triggers were found. Now, let's go ahead and first understand, power management is only for those people that have waste. If you don't have inactivity on your computers, you don't have waste. And therefore, you have nothing to improve. Good for you. But we need to understand if you do have waste, should you even take the time to create power policies or move on to a more important project? One of the ways you can do this is by having a solution that allows you to see the breakdown of activity versus inactivity. Now I'm going to go ahead and run a report, same date range, right? Started January 19th. I changed up to February 1st as the end date, so 2 weeks. What this will do is show us the breakdown between when the PCs are off, your end users are using them, and they're simply sitting there not being used. Why is this critical? Because it'll allow you to see whether power management is something you even have to worry about. Now on this graph, if it's green, that's fantastic. It's easy to be green. PCs are already turned off or in a reduced power state such as standby or hibernate. The blue, that's when the users are using their PCs. And by the laws of the Microsoft operating systems, activity is defined as hitting the keyboard, smacking the trackpad, or moving the mouse around on the desk. Right? People are actually using them. Don't worry about applications. We'll talk about those later in the presentation. The red, ladies and gentlemen, that is your cash cow. This is what you want to target. Successful power management targets inactivity while respecting the amount of activity your end users need to be productive every single given day. And again, I'm not talking about best practices. There is no such thing. I said successful power management is made to target the inactivity. Well, unless you know you have inactivity, you can't target it, right? So visibility, key to being successful. Now, once you know that you have inactivity, let's go ahead and dig just a little bit deeper, shall we? If we go ahead and choose a workstation, and it can be anything at all, doesn't matter which one it is, we're going to go ahead and look at a specific day because I want to show you what we track. I'm going to go back to January again, just as I said. We'll go ahead and choose 29th as an example. If I go ahead and bring this up, what this is going to show us is the monitor and the workstation, the status of each, every minute of every hour of every day. Why is this important? Because our agent, our power management agent that goes on each individual workstation, will track every minute and report back, was the computer being used? Yes or no? Was it inactive? Yes or no? Was it previously in a reduced power state? Yes or no? Why is that important? It's because when you look at trigger actions, you need to understand what the general schema is of your inactivity. What is the nature of your inactivity? Now from here, once you understand you have that problem, now we can go ahead and take a look at the most critical key component of the entire product and something that you need despite what you use as your power management solution. It doesn't matter if it's a Verismic product. It doesn't matter if it's another company's product. It doesn't matter if you make something in-house. What you have to understand is this graph over here to the far right. This is your inactivity time slice. What this tells you is out of 100% of the inactivity, and remember we saw a lot of it there, what is the nature of that inactivity? Is it typically chunks of 1 to 5 minutes? Is it chunks of, say, 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe 30 to 60? Or as you see here, are most of the chunks in periods of longer than 2 hours? Why is this important? Because if you were to make a trigger timer that is not matching with your inactivity, you're never going to save any power. I'll show you what I mean. Let's go ahead real quick, and we'll take that example I gave of that white paper. That's just a shot in the dark. Now, in this example, if I were to set a timer to put PCs into standby for 60 minutes, would I have a positive impact on the environment? Would I save money? Well, the answer is yes. You absolutely would. Because you see, in this particular example, much of that inactivity are in chunks larger than 2 hours. Therefore, the workstations would remain inactive long enough to get to that 60-minute timer to put them into standby. Now, imagine with me, if you will. Flip this graph upside down. Imagine all the inactivity are in chunks of 5 to 10 minutes. Now let's take that same scenario. If I set that trigger timer to put the PCs into standby after 60 minutes, would I save any power and cost now? The answer is no. If the majority of your inactivity is in periods of 5 to 10 minutes, you're never going to be inactive long enough for that 60-minute trigger to take effect to put the PC to sleep. You'll still have the same amount of inactivity. It simply is in smaller chunks. Therefore, understanding this time slice is critical. Now, if we have that in mind, and we go back to take a look at the power policy, now you can start to see the person who made this didn't just take stabs in the dark. They understood exactly where their inactivity was. They knew the different actions that they could use that would be effective. They understood the triggers had to be finely tuned for different parts of the day, right? Whether it be Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday, as an example. And what they also understood were the periods in each of those days when those trigger timers would be most effective. Having information is what allows you to be successful in fine-tuning a power policy. Now, some may say, well, wait a second, do I have to make a power policy for every single person in my company? No. Could you with this product? Well, absolutely, if you want to, but no, you absolutely don't. Could I get away with making one power policy for my entire organization? Perhaps. Depends on the size, the scope, how many locations they're in, and the nature of their jobs. You could possibly get away with one power policy. More likely, what you're going to do is find the overall groups where their behavior or job roles are changing ever so slightly, where a slightly different power policy will make all the difference in the world to being effective. Whether that means you have one power policy, 2 or 3 or more, well, that's completely up to you. If you want to take a blind shot and make just one, you can do just that. Now, once we have the power policy, we could go ahead and actually put this onto a workstation or a group of workstations. But what I want to do first is explain 2 things while we're still in phase 2. What are these different actions and what makes this scheduling engine special? And then also predicting the future. That's the whole point of this phase, right? Being able to predict the future. So let's go ahead and we'll open up one of these actions as an example real quick. Right off the bat, you can see we can do standby and hibernate, and we can turn them off. Those are the typical modes that everybody knows about. Now, there was a common misconception many years ago that if you couldn't turn your computers all the way off at night, what was the point of doing power management? You're not going to save anything. Hibernate and standby are worthless. 10, 12 years ago, they were absolutely right. Computers were far less efficient. If you didn't turn them off, you were still consuming a great deal of power in both standby and hibernate. However, for the last 10 years or so, say 7, 8 years, that's no longer the case. If you look at the modes, they're much, much more efficient. Hibernate, standby, and power off are so close together, it's no longer a matter of how much power you want to save and how much you want to reduce your power bills. Now it's a matter of choosing which one is best for your user environment, their work habits, and what's also politically acceptable within the organization. There is a fine balance you have to walk between making the computers unusable by the end users and saving power. Therefore, the 3 modes need to be viewed as in all options available. You choose what's best for you. I'll give you an example. Let's go ahead and take a workstation, a typical workstation like the DX5150. If you put that into a power off state, you may still consume, say, 1 watt to 1.5, just as an example. If we put it into hibernate, maybe you're going to consume anywhere from, say, 1.5 to 3 or 4 watts. Now let's go ahead and move up to standby. This could be anything from, say, 3 watts up to 6 watts. The difference is so minor. When you look at the different values, as I said, it's no longer about how much power you want to save. You choose what is best for your environment. And if that is only standby, then so be it. You're still going to save astronomical amounts. You do not have to turn your PCs off. Now, the trigger timer. What are the different values we can put in here? What if 45 doesn't meet exactly right? What if I need 47 minutes as an inactivity trigger? Fine, that's no problem at all. We track all the way down to the minute level. Our agent looks for the status of every minute. It also checks to see if they're supposed to do anything every minute. So unlike many products where they have inactivity triggers, which are set for periods of 5 minutes, or periods of 10, or possibly even 15 minutes, you can go all the way down to the single minute level with us. It's no impact to the workstation whatsoever. What it does is give you the flexibility that once you have the inactivity information and you have the visibility over how that inactivity occurs, you can create a power policy that's going to be effective. What good is visibility if you don't have a tool that can take advantage of your knowledge, right? So, I'll go ahead and I'll just put this back to 45 as an example. The scheduling engine, why is this so important? Let's go ahead and take Active Directory as a comparison example. In Active Directory, you can set an action you want to occur after a certain period of time. The problem is you can't flip that setting back and forth at will, not only day to day, but you can't flip it back and forth at will hour to hour within a day, or minute to minute within a day. With our scheduling engine, you can. And the example I'll give, maybe you want to have computers go to sleep between midnight and 6 a.m. after 15 minutes. But then during the workday, you want to be a little bit more accepting of the end user's varying schedules. So you change it. So during the workday, you put them to sleep after 90 minutes, just as an example for presentation. Then in the evening, say maybe after 1900, you want to go back to 15 minutes. You can set up our scheduling engine to have any number of schedules that you want. There is no limit. Once you have that information, that visibility, you literally have the ability to act on it. When you look at the scheduling engine, also realize that if you want a certain item to occur globally at a specific time, you can go ahead and arrange that. An example may be a wake up. Maybe you want to have a global period where you can apply patches regardless of their time zone in North America because they're all within 3 or 4 hours. You can go ahead and set for all computers to wake up a specific time in the evening that will be covered automatically across all the time zones at the same point. Therefore, you leave the sleep schedule to be different for the time zones. You leave your wake up to be the same. Very powerful scheduling engine. Now, with those different actions, let's go ahead and talk about predicting the future. Why is it we can predict the future with any accuracy, and what would it look like? Well, if we have this power policy with all these fancy actions and all these fancy timers, we've done it because we base our decisions of what to put in the power policy on your user's inactivity. Well, it should stand to reason that the predictive analysis should do the exact same thing, right? So let's go ahead and we'll run one of these reports real quick. We're going to go ahead and choose a group of PCs we're going to use as our baseline. And we're going to go down and run a predictive report. We're going to run a 1-month prediction, just because I don't want to tie you up here on our presentation. We're going to choose which power policy or multiple policies we want to predict. And it's going to ask us, based upon what date range do you want the software to make its prediction? And again, same dates as before, the 19th going into February the 1st. And do you want to predict both computers and monitors or just computers? For the sake of time, we'll just go ahead and do computers. Now, the reason I say it stands to make sense that if we are going to base our power policies off of end user behavior and specific data in your environment, our predictive analysis should as well, is because once we understand when your computers are being used or they're already powered down, the software can take the power policy that you created and base it across what we've already monitored. It will know if you're putting PCs to sleep, say between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m., well, if there are 500 that were already asleep during your baseline monitoring phase, then you wouldn't be saving any money with your power policy. Conversely, if you want to have it, say, keep monitors off after 10 minutes of inactivity, Monday through Friday, 24 hours a day, and your monitors have never went to sleep in your organization, then there would be a cost savings. Remember, we know what the computers and monitors are doing every single minute of the day. We're going to take that power policy and we're going to put that across the baseline and say this would be the positive impact to your power costs and your consumption based upon your users' inactivity habits and your machine's power down status versus up and running, this is what you would save. And in this example, 77.87%. Many organizations will look at it and say, well, it's just a prediction. It can't possibly be accurate. If you didn't have accurate information, then yes. But remember the 3 points that we have. 1, we have the real consumption values for your workstations and your monitors. That is what they're pulling out of the wall. 2, we have the actual cost that you are paying for power. And if there's multiple locations and variable rates, we have that as well. All of that is in place. And 3, we know the levels of inactivity, and we know what the approximate type of inactivity you have is. That's the time slice. Well, if we know all of this, we know the impact of the cost and consumption, and we know whether or not our triggers and our timers will be right. So yes, our predictive analysis can be highly successful and highly accurate. And in fact, in our pilots, so far in the last 5 years, it has never been more than 3% off of reality once we come back and find real results for our production customers. So keep that in mind. Yes, predictive analysis can be awfully gray if you don't have accurate data. And for products that don't take the time for real consumption values and real cost of power and information based upon your inactivity, you're right, you shouldn't trust them. But when you have a product that does take all 3 of those points into consideration, those predictive analyses can be extremely accurate. Now, once we have the power policy and we have the predictive analysis, and all the parts within your organization agree they want to implement it, how can we accomplish that? This is another huge pitfall that most organizations run into when it comes to implementing power management schemes. They don't want something they have to maintain and push out to workstations every day or every week or every month. And nor should they, right? It's going to be an absolute pain. Our solution is designed by taking advice from our customers over the last 13 years of systems management. And we've tried to eliminate all the pitfalls that they said they no longer want to deal with. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of these settings that will explain how we implement power policies. First off, there is nothing to push from the server to the workstation. It's impossible. There is no way to make the server contact the workstation. Our agent has no listening ports whatsoever. What happens, all the communication is initiated from the agent, which takes a huge burden off of the IT administrator's hands. All the power data is uploaded on a regular basis as you see fit to the Power Manager server. We will automatically check in for power policies as frequently or infrequently as you want. Typically when you're getting started, you're going to have a more frequent check-in, and then once you get them fine-tuned, you're going to go ahead and scale that back. When the power policy is downloaded, it will automatically be applied to the workstation with no interaction required from the IT administrator. We're also going to look for upgrades to the product. Now, this has nothing to do with the power policy, but while we're here, it's a very important point. One thing we were told from all of our customers, please, whatever you do, don't make us deploy service packs to our agents every single time one comes out. Don't make us deploy a patch specifically for an agent every time it comes out. Therefore, once you apply the needed files to the server, the workstation will go ahead and download those, silently install without a reboot, with no interaction required from the IT admin. A very important item there. Now, with the power policies being pulled from the agents, how you apply those to the agent is equally as simple. If we look at the different grouping items that we have here, let's take a look at this. The first one is our global grouping, and you can design this to be anything you want. This structure is completely customizable. It's a tree structure with an infinite number of sublevels to it, where you can go ahead and move the devices into the groups that you want. It's completely up to you. What you can also do, if you so wish, is to go ahead and apply based upon the OU. Now, let me go ahead and clarify how this works. Do we require Active Directory for the product to be successful? No. Do we have any functionality which is dependent upon Active Directory? No. What this allows you to do is take the OUs, which is reported in by the workstations, and if you so deem, you can apply the power policy based upon that ownership. When a workstation checks into the server, it will tell the server, I am a member of these OUs. Are there any power policies which you would like me to download? This all happens at the Verismic server level. Nothing is done to Active Directory. No changes are needed to Active Directory. And as I said before, if your Active Directory structure is not logically mature for how you would like to apply power policies, that's fine. We have no need for it whatsoever. In either of these cases, the workstation will find the power policy which is applied to it, whether it be, as I said, by the OU membership, or whether it be by the global site grouping that you've created, or our third option, which would be our query section, where you can go ahead and create groups based upon certain Boolean criteria. In any of these scenarios where a workstation does fit, and the server says, yes, you should implement a power policy, that will automatically be downloaded to the workstation and applied. No interaction required from the IT administrator. All you do, and I hate to use this phrase, but it's accurate, is set it and forget it. At that point, every workstation will check in and get the desired power policy. Now, once that's in place, now we can start to see what the impact is going to be. Remember phase 3. Looking back and says, show me the money. If we've taken the time in phase 1 to get all the accurate information from where we were, we've taken the time in phase 2 to understand our predictive analysis and whether or not a power policy will be successful. Now what we can do is go back and say, did we make a difference? Once the power policy is applied, did it knock out our inactivity levels without impacting the end users? Well, let's take a look. We're going to go ahead and take these same date ranges again. I'm going to do January 19th to February 15th. And what this is going to show us is whether or not we reduced that inactivity. You're going to recognize this report. You've already looked at it once. This is the colored breakdown between reduced power state when the users are using the workstation and when they're sitting there inactive. Now in this example, I'm just going to maximize this report for us to see. If you take a look all the way up until February 2nd, huge amounts of inactivity. In this particular instance for this database, when the customer implemented the power policy, immediately from February 2nd on, a huge reduction in the inactivity. Now, that in itself would seem as saying we were successful. But what I always like to point out, reducing inactivity by itself does not mean your power policy was correct. You have to make sure, as I said before, you're not impeding the end users from using the workstation. How do we know that? Look at the blue. The blue is equally as important as the reduction in red. The blue, all the way from the very beginning of this example, all the way through after the power policy was applied, stayed the same. Why is that critical? Because it means your end users continued to work as they always have. They continued to have access to their PC with no obstacles. All we did was target that inactivity when they weren't using them. And if you have that combination of continuous and steady blue activity with a reduction in red inactivity, that means you have a successful power policy. You are indeed reducing your power consumption and therefore your power costs. Now, some of the other reports that we can run, there are numerous, but to go ahead and just show you an example, if I want to run a comparison, say between a period of when there was no power policy compared to when there was, what you're going to see is a day-by-day overlap. So I'm going to take January 19th through February 1st, and I'm going to go ahead and overlay that to February 2nd, as an example, to February 15th. So an even 2 weeks on each period. What this will do is give you an idea of what the drop was on each of those individual days for it. Now remember, this is the cost total, so it's showing you what it costs to run these specific machines, and you'll see here 49 machines for each of these days. The biggest drops, very visible, right? Sunday and Saturday. Typically, this is what we always see. There are safe havens for power waste. It doesn't matter if you are government, military, if you're a private, or if you happen to be education, you're always going to see safe haven waste on the weekends. The question is, one, how do you find out how bad it is? And two, how do you tackle it? Again, do you put on a blind power policy to put your PCs to sleep after 60 minutes of inactivity? You could, but you have no idea if it's going to be successful. It has nothing to do with your environment. Here, what you had is a tool that knew exactly when the inactivity occurred. It was respectful of the end users, and it targeted those areas of the big waste, highly successful. Right? See, Monday 55%, Thursday 24%, Friday 32%, and what that resulted in was a dramatic difference. The 2-week period of the 19th to the 1st for these 49 machines cost $140, whereas the following 2 weeks, back to back, the 2nd to the 15th only cost $84. Very dramatic difference for you to go ahead and see. Now, is that all? Should you stop with the reports? Well, the answer is no. What we found in our early years is our customers would take these reports and they would be happy with the results that they see. We're glad people love the reports, but we don't want you to stop there. And in fact, if you were to work with us and we were to partner together, we wouldn't let you. Reports are fantastic, but I hate to tell you this, these reports neither ask you to pay a power bill nor reflect what you're actually paying for that power bill. This is telling you what the drop is for those PCs. That when it really hits the road is when you sign your signature to a check and you hand that check over to the power company. What we want you to do is to take these reports, and if you should see an approximate drop in cost of power, check that. Go to see your finance department and ask, what did we pay our power vendor the first 3 months when we had no power policies applied? What have we paid our power vendor now for the last 3 months when we did have power policies applied? Because according to the Verismic reports, we should have a significant drop in what we're paying. Take both of them. Take the reports, use them for educational purposes, use them to fine-tune your power policies, but in no way stop with our reports. Go to your power company and challenge us. Challenge the product, challenge the reports, and if you see a drop according to the Verismic products, and you see 0 drops or even an increase of power on your power vendor reports, challenge it. Find out, are our reports wrong? Or do you have power consumption happening elsewhere outside of IT to explain it? Now that's not a challenge back to the power vendor bills. That's for you to understand the nature of your power consumption. Everything consumes power. Televisions, PCs, monitors, coffee makers, lights, you name it, even pencil sharpeners. Therefore, you need to understand when you see positive results, is it because of the PC power management and the policies you've made? When you see negative results, is it because of PC power management or something else? All of these variables come into play. Now, the solution also has additional features which we call housekeeping. I want to go ahead and walk you through these because this was going to help you accomplish successful power management. The first item right off the bat is going to be what we call a role-based administration. What this allows is for different people with different roles in the organization to have different access to the product. I'll give you an example. A typical C-level exec should not have full admin permissions to Power Manager. And for those who are watching this presentation, I'm sure you agree with me. You may want it, but it doesn't mean you should have it. When we look at the product, we want to make sure that the 3 triangle points to successful power management can access what they need. Those 3 points are IT, management, and green facilities, and sometimes what you call sustainability. All 3 play a different role. IT's job is not to do power vendor cost maintenance. IT's job is not to make the hard decisions whether or not power policies will be implemented. IT's job is to take care of the Power Manager software from any product, whether it's ours or anyone else's, to be able to provide information back to the 3 points, and design power policies for consideration. Therefore, IT would need full admin. Now, let's go ahead and take the executives. All they need is the ability to run reports. That's it. Therefore, we want to make sure we can give them just the ability they need to access this. If we can't fine-tune the security rights, then chances are nobody's going to be allowed to access the system but IT. Power management is not an IT burden. If you need to, write that down. If you take nothing else from this presentation, power management is not an IT burden. It is a group effort in an organization between IT, management, and green facilities sustainabilities, as I said. Now, if we look at the rights for facilities, they're not going to care about how to get the agents out. They're not going to care about how to deploy the upgrades. They're not going to care about looking for how the power policies are applied. Their job is to run reports and also ensure that their area of expertise, the changing power costs, are continually updated. And also the power vendors. Why is that important? Because now what you've done is delegated rights. You've made sure that everybody has access to the modules they need for their areas of responsibility. Critical, because as I said again, power management is not an IT burden. You cannot put all of the responsibilities from a power management initiative on IT shoulders. Now, once people have the right access, then you can also worry about, well, where are they located in the world? Remember I mentioned that our solution is global capable, is right out of the bat. We support 21 different currencies, and we're adding more every day. What you can do is also fine-tune the console per user so they can look through and decide, do they want to see things in the US dollars? Do they want to see it in a Brazilian currency, an Indian currency, perhaps the euro? That way, all the data is kept in one spot, and it's changed upon the view depending upon who wants to see it. What we also have is an automatic exchange rate updater. This way we can go out and constantly, every single day, update the changing exchange rates. As I said, we support many different currencies now. We're continually adding more. These are merely the countries right now where we have customers, and we're trying to add more and more to keep ahead of the growing Verismic family globally. Now, when you have access to the console and you can see all this information, what this is going to do is spark conversation. And hopefully it will spark conversation between different departments in your organization. You're going to have IT and management come together. You're going to have needs from the sustainability people, and they want to make sure what they have are met. But one of the big things that IT is going to respond with is we cannot sacrifice our abilities to maintain the workstations, their state of security, just to save power. And they're absolutely correct. You cannot do that in any way, shape, or form. So how do we ensure that security is met while still reducing power? Well, if we go back to our power policy for a moment, this is one of our last items I want to go ahead and walk you through. We can put the PCs down. However, it may seem counterproductive to be able to turn the PCs on. It really is needed though. Take this example, turning the PCs on at 1:50 a.m. on a Thursday. Why would you need to be able to do this? Well, as I said, IT is going to go ahead and position the argument. We must be able to patch our computers. We must be able to deploy software updates because we don't want these happening during the day. It's going to impede the ability for the end users to be productive. When all 3 points of that triangle are speaking, IT, management, and facilities, this requirement is already met. We have the ability for PCs that are in that reduced state of standby to go ahead and schedule local wake-ups. When this wake-up is set to occur, say as an example as I did, 1:50 on a Thursday, that's going to be programmed locally on the workstation. So no wake on LAN packet has to go out. Now if you want to reduce the power settings even further, yes, we have the ability to do wake on LAN as well if you want to put them into hibernate or say it into a full power off. Remember what I said before, the 3 power modes have nothing to do any longer with today's modern PCs as to how much power you want to save. It has to do with what you need to accomplish in your environment while understanding there's a cost of doing business. And if it's only a percentage point or two between turning them fully off into a hibernate, or a percentage point or two between hibernate and standby because you want to have a locally scheduled wake up for your patch window, then so be it. If you want to go ahead and keep this on, say for 2 hours, that's perfectly fine. Now, the question is going to come up, great, you can schedule a wake up for the window, but how do you keep the computers up and running? What if I need to ensure that my antivirus scans run and are not stopped because the computer goes back to sleep? What if I need to ensure my WSUS updates complete before the computer goes back to sleep? This brings us to our protected applications. Now this can be used in any number of different ways. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the easiest method to understand how we protect applications. There's 2 types. There are relative and there are also applications that we simply don't care, absolute, what they're doing. We simply want to make sure that they're up all the time. Let's go ahead and take an example of absolute. PowerPoint is fantastic for this. PowerPoint, usually the people that use PowerPoint and give presentations are going to have large periods of inactivity. And even when the application process itself doesn't use much of any of the CPU. Therefore, in an absolute protection, what we can say is if this process is running, right, we can use PowerPoint or even as you see back here, antivirus as an example. If this application is running, I don't care if it uses any of the processing utility time at all. The mere fact that it's open, leave it run. And this is something you can put to schedule during your patch window. So that when it comes up, if you want to make sure, say PowerPoint was the one I used, but if you want to have an antivirus scan that is protected, that's fine, you can do that. And therefore, the workstation will not shut back down before it's done. Now, a good example of a relative type of application you want to protect is AutoCAD. The reason I use this one is because it will do a whole lot of activity for the, say, first 8, 12, 24 hours, but then afterwards, someone may not come back to the workstation to check its progress for 2, 3, 4 more days. Therefore, what we want to do is tell Power Manager, protect the application relative to what it's doing. If it spikes the CPU processor for even a moment, then yes, to 30%, then yes, go ahead and protect it. However, if we go for 2 full hours and it does not reach 30% protection, then assume this particular application, AutoCAD as I said, is done working. Allow it to go into standby. What that will do is allow you to choose whether or not you want to simply protect an application because it is running, such as in a maintenance window, or if you want to have a little bit more intelligence built in that tries to watch and determine if the application still needs to be up and running. 2 very different ways, and also very powerful ways that will allow you to maintain workstation uptime when it needs to be, but also to not lose out on power savings when you don't need to worry about those applications any further. Now, this is merely a handful of features within the product. Typically, our presentations are between 60 and 90 minutes to show everything that's in there. What I've done is tried to give you a nice brief overview of all the functionality that's available throughout the 3 phases. As I said, I didn't want to do a feature presentation walking you through every little checkbox of the product. That's boring and you're going to fall asleep. What I tried to do is show you the highlighted features that express the story of power management through the 3 phases. Phase 1, understanding where you are currently, how much power you're using and what it costs. Phase 2, predicting the future before you implement power policies so that you don't lose savings opportunities throughout the year. And then Phase 3, looking back to see how much money was saved. Did you save any money, and which areas were most successful with your power policies? If you have any questions whatsoever about the product, I am happy to answer them for you. You're welcome to contact us at www.verismic.com. That is verismic.com. And again, it's been my pleasure to walk you through Verismic Power Manager version 3.22. I look forward to hearing from you, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.